Okay, we're up to Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. Today's daf is Tesvav. You say this to Gadaf. Malkum shenogu limcha behema daka lo'avdei kechavim. In a place, lashon noyig, that the minig is to sell behema daka to avdei kechavim. Moichrin. Malkum shenogu shaloi limchor. Ein moichrin. Now, what are you worried about by a behema daka, a small animal? You're worried about snus. You're worried about doing snus with the animal, and therefore, if the choshif is snus, you'll be able to lift the evil esitim michshol. Again, what's nagir you? You'll be able to lift the evil esitim michshol. So by hemedaka, it depends on what it depends on minik. Ubechol makom, no matter what, a moichin lehem behemagasa, you can't sell a heavy animal. Agolim, calves, sayachim, I think are horses, and shleimim, ushvurim, whether they're intact or not intact. Rabbi Yehuda Mata b'shvura, he permits a shvura. Okay, so now behemagasa, fellas, is a different reason. It's a Shabbos tikadin. It's a Shabbos tikadin. Now, we're mitzvah on shvisas behemtai. We're mitzvah not to go ahead, Rod, and work our animals on Shabbos. Good. If you go ahead and lend your animal to a guy or rent your animal to a guy, it's going to be go ahead, Rod, and working on Shabbos. So to avoid that, we say that you can't sell, and by not selling, you won't come to go ahead and rent or lend. So that's the reason. And even if it's an animal, a pashtus that can't work because it's shavur, nonetheless, you don't go ahead, Rod, and Yehuda says and sell it. Yehuda matir b'shvura uben b'seira matir b'sus. Okay, let's see Rashi. What? Are you going to lend? Are you going to lend your car to a guy? And a car has a din of a kli, Avrami. There's no din of shvisas kalim. It's not an animal. It's not an animal. It's only by an animal. Like a big machloikis between Rabbi Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai in Daf Yud Ches and Shabbos. We paskin like Beis Hillel that there's no din of shvisas kalim. In other words, if you had din of shvisas kalim, how could you cook your cholent? Right, it's working on Shabbos. So a car is din of a kli. But even so, a sale of a car, what are you going to do what are you going to lend your car? Are you worried that if you come to sell your car, you lend the car? Again, it's only an animal, So now, Rashi says, behema gasa, mifnei yuchedes l'malacha. Behema gasa, they're used for work. V'oisa bein masay malacha b'Shabbos, and they can go ahead and work them on Shabbos. Agolim sayachim shleimim b'shvurim, v'afilu shvurim. The Kiddush is, even shvurim, which are broken, she'ena ru'yin l'malacha, gazu barabanan. Right? Aruyin l'malacha. You know, as we let you go ahead and sell that, you may come to go ahead and sell shleimim. The isyune is, we're going to see that they would test it, to give it a test drive. Can the farish time be Gemara? Rabbi Yehuda mati b'shvurim, farish time Gemara, and b'meseira mati b'sus. Now this is fast. A sus is different. A sus is different. The malacha of a sus is what is for riding it. For rechiva shvusi, that's only in the Rabbanan. For lav malacha, and there's no malacha. Mishum dechainosi asatzmo, because the person carries himself. Therefore, since we're not concerned if you're going to go ahead, if you go ahead and you lend a horse or rent a horse, you're not being going into the deraisa because the person's carrying themselves. Some mela they weren't going through on selling. So the Mishnah told us two dinim. Basically, he told us the din of what of a behema daka that depends on minig, whether what it's a place the chayish for revia for znus. If you are, you can't sell. If not chayish, you could sell. And the din behema gasa you can't sell. Why? Because you're chayish that you may come to lend and or rent, and you're mitzvah in shvisas behemtai. And we have machloikis by shvura and Rabbi Beseira who says matis besus. Right? Not really. It's wrong. Again. Where's the second zera?
The damaged horse, animal, not horse.
Damaged animal? No, damage. You guys are. You're saying you guys are shvur at the shleima and shleima at the shula. I think it could be one gezerah. I hear what you're saying, but it could be. It's like one big gezerah. Can you sell it or not? Okay, so now for two different reasons, but can you sell it or not? Says the Gemara, Lememra di surah leka. when it said Shenoga Limcha, we said clearly what? That it's a minig. So we're making a statement, Lemema de Surleka, minig hu de Ika, and therefore Heicha de Noig Issa, Noig. Where you noyig issa, you the noyig, heicha the noyig, het the noyig. That's what seems to be from the Mishnah. That's a din what in minig. Fred the Gemara mini. I'll ask you a stira. Eima midim behema bepundakoi shalev dekachavim. You can't go ahead and keep your animal in the pundak and an inn of an dekachavim. Meisha chashudim ala ravia. They're choshid for what? So this seems to be that what? That it's not a minig, but it's usher. Also to go ahead and put your animal in this place, and it's not making a chilik between the place that choshid rayas. It seems that you choshid rayas, so it means it's mashma, it's an issa, but it's not a minik. Amarav, and for Rav, makam she'tirui limchar, etirui liyachid. In a place they matted to sell, they matted liyachid. In other words, the tak is minik, and therefore, why could you sell there? Because you're not chayish l'revia, and since you're not chayish l'revia, you can be miyachid with the guy. The animal. But it's a minig. So Rashi says, it's speaking about a place you chayish l'revia. So your kasha was it's an issa. It's not an issa. It's a minig. Good. Rebbe Lazar Eimer. Rabbi Lazar was Rabbi Lazar ben Padas, fellas. This is the Talmud Muvik of Rabbi Yochanan from Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Lazar Aimer, af b'makom she'asru liyached mutar limchar. So in other words, it's not totally in minig at all. It's not totally in minig at all. You're always asa. You're always asa to sell. I did not chayish l'revia, right? Nonetheless, af b'makom she'asru liyached mutar limchar. It's permitted to sell. No, it's not asa, so you could sell. Guys, here you can go ahead and sell a behema daka. You could sell a behema daka. Why? Right? Why my timer? It seems the actus nus is going to go ahead and affect the reproductive cycle of the animal. So therefore, you could sell because he's not going to be ravei of the animal. The afrav hadebei damarav tachlif amarav shila baravimi mishmei derav. And therefore you could sell it. Says Rashi, Rabbi Lezer Omer, even a place where it's asal liyachid, even in a place it's kidikani ba'hu deimamidim, right? Why? Because it's we're choshif el arayis. You can't be guys. You're not selling an animal. Ain't minded. You can't put your animal in a place where you chayish they can do an avera to the animal. Nonetheless, in that place, you will be able to sell the animal. You know why? Because the guy is not going to go ahead, even though he's a Baltaiva, he's not going to go ahead and comes to Geltz and on the Revelt. He's not going to go ahead and ruin his animal. Says that's the din over here. Geschmack. And Rav agrees. Behema gasa. You can't sell a behema gasa. My timer. Nihidil reveal like chashinon ma'ava malacha chashinon. In other words, even not chayish for znus, but chayish that they're going to work the animal. So therefore, now l'chayra v'nevad kivin de zavna kanya. Who cares? I read it wrong. Chashina v'nevad. Is that the? You're right. V'nevad. Okay. So I read it right. V'nevad. Let it do work. What's the problem? Kivin de zavna kanya. You sold the animal. It's his animal. He's not mitzvah. He himself is not mitzvah in Shabbos. Certainly in his animal, he's not mitzvah. So sell the animal. What are you worried about? Sell the animal. What are you worried about? Says the Gemara Gezerah, as I told you, mishum she'ela or mishum schiris. In other words, if you go ahead and sell the animal, you may come to rent the animal or lend the animal. Now, the Gemara has the following question: when you lend an animal out, that person has certain bilis in the animal. He's chayiv ba'insin. So give it to him. What are you worried about? That it's your animal? When it's in his jurisdiction, it's like it's his animal. When you rent an animal, he has certain achrayas. He's chayiv b'nei v'aveda. If you pass on the Shem Esacha. So Memela, Fred the Gemara, What's your problem over here? You're worried if you sell it, you might come to rent or lend. No problem. We have no problem. Says the Gemara, Shela Kanya, the Igra Kanya. When you go ahead and you lend an animal, he acquires the animal. The Igra, when he pays rent, Kanya. So in other words, that can't be the reason because you won't be over on Shvisas Behemtoi. So go ahead, sell the animal. You're worried about Shela Schiris? Shayla Schiris is nothing to worry about. It's in his rishus. It's in his rishus. It's like his, and therefore there's no isser of what of working the animal on Shabbos. So Amar Rami Breid Rav Yeva Gezera Mishum Nisyune. The reason why you can't sell an animal Gezera Mishum Lashon Nisayin, the test drive. What's the test drive? Tizimnim dezavnan lei nele samech l'shkia. You're gonna sell it to him samech l'shkia. Hachama the mali shabbata on erev Shabbos. For amalei tanasya nehale. Right. Let's check it out. I'm gonna load him up this donkey, and I want to see what if he can carry the load. Vishamalei lekale, and the animal's gonna hear his owner's voice. V'azla machmasei, and he's gonna go as a result of. Hazel, and it's good that he's going because he's showing he can work. It's mechamer achamei the din of mechamer is the animal's going because of you. According to one opinion, and some is mechamer. So in other words, guys, let's outside. We have a din. What's that din? You can't sell a behema gasa. Why can't you sell a behema gasa? Because you may come to lend and rent. Fred the Gemara, lend and rent because it's into hate. It's in his rishus. Another reason, if you're going to go ahead and sell it, he may come. When are you going to sell it? Erev Shabbos Samach Shkia. You're going to go ahead wide and test drive it when on Shabbos, and it's going to be mechamer achamei masai. You all be why do you have to come up with mechamer achamei masai, guys? You could say what als shvisus behemtoi. Okay, guys, l'chayr. In other words, so the Gemara is answering that what? You're going to sell it Erev Shabbos, he's going to test drive it. Until he test drive it, there's no kinyan. It's still in your rishus. Says the Gemara, you'll be chayav for being machmer achavei masa b'Shabbos. Frek toisvis, v'shama l'koyloi v'ozl machmasei, tap toisvis, and taimar. Lama li time with the machamer. Typically, mishum shvisas mehemtoi l'chud. No, that's enough of a reason. Shvisas mehemtoi. Why do you have to come? Why do you have to come to machmer behemasai? V'oimeri, mishum shvisas behemtoi l'chud lahiv asrin and mechira. The less be issa ki im lefi shah. In other words, we wouldn't have made this whole gezerah for this case of the test drive Erev Shabbos. Why? Because it's only a small window that what you can go ahead and do the aveira. That small window. But regarding working the animal on Shabbos, right? Ki im lefi shah mishum nisyune v'dafka she'eloi schiris asrinan mishum shvisas behemtoi. Mishum the oisa kol Shabbos. He's going to work the whole Shabbos. Aval mishum nisyune the aim by issa el lefi shah lo yasrinan. Okay, what's the kasha? What's the teretz, guys? What's the kasha? What's the teretz? Why does the Gemara have to give the reason? That the reason you can't sell a behemoth daka is because you're going to do a test drive, and the animal's going to move because of your voice, and you'll be over being machmer behemoth b'Shabbos fake toisus. Why do you have to come to machmer behemoth Shabbos? It's still your animal. You're working the animal on Shabbos. And for the Gemara, that. What are we worried about? We're worried about a whole Shabbos. If you're going to go ahead and rent an animal, lend the animal, you have the whole Shabbos to go ahead and work it. This nisyoine is l'fisha. It's only that little period of time. We're not worried about what? We're not worried about shvisas behemtoi to make a gezerah that you can't sell. It's a very little small period. So what's the whole list if it's a small period? Machma, you're going to cause it to go ahead and run. It's a beautiful teretz in places a distinction. Now the places ends up the mach. Lefisha, ilav taima the machmir the chometfei. It's the shvisas behemtoi being machmir. Machmir, guys, is the animal coming after you is more chomer than shvisas behemtoi. Shvisas behemtoi, at least not according to Rashi, according to most Rishonim, is an asay. It's a mitzvah asay. Mecham is a lois asay. So therefore. It's a mochamer. What's mochamer? That's what they speak at. Okay, what was the first teretz, guys? She'ela, it's in the Geis Rishus. Schira, in the Geis Rishus. It should not be shvi. You should be able to do it and not a problem. Shvisas behemtoi. Maskavav shisha bereid ravidi who schiris mikanya. Schiris mikanya v'tanan a mishnah. Af b'makom shamu lahaschir. Right. Even they said a place where you could rent to a guy. Loy lebait beistira amru. They said you can't rent it mat as a place of lodging. The rental would be, guys, for storage. Guys, the rental would be for storage. It would not be for living. Because he's living there, he's going to bring into the house, he's going to bring in an Avodah Zorah in. These Sakadaitas, Schiris Kanya, you're going to tell me Schiris is Kaina, and it's in the Rishus of the guy, Hakika Malia, Lebesa Malia. When he brings it in, he's bringing it out into his own house. So, in other words, we're questioning your whole premise to begin with. We ended up saying, guys, the case of test drive. Why? Because Schiritz is in his Rishus. And since it's in his Rishus, you're not over on Shvisas Behemtai, right? Fred the Gemara, what are you talking about? Schiris, it's still in your Rishus. What's the riot still in your Rishus? Because you can't rent it for him to live there because he's going to bring his Avodah Zarah into your house. Keyword being your. That's why your house. The keyword being your house, yeah? So Mamela, what do you see? It's your house. So Mamela, I can understand. You know why they said you can't sell? Because they may come to rent. And if you're going to rent and he works it, it's going to be Oivan Shvisas Behemtai. So why do you have to come to the time of the Nisyaina? Says one another. Shani Avodah Kechavim the Chamira. Avodah Zarah is different. Even if it's what? A rental, right? In other words, it's chamir to the extent that even though Schiris is considered Rishus of the Goy, since we're machmir that since you own the house, then you can't go ahead and bring Beisecha. So we're keeping the same teretz. Schiris really is in the Goy's Rishus, and really therefore Shvisas Behemtoi, it's there's no Isser because again it's not yours. Vis-a-vis the halacha of bringing Avodah Zarah and you own the house, that l'chayra you can't do. But right now we've held serve to that, and therefore the only reason they came up with the gezerah of selling was what? Because of the test drive. Maskav Rabbi Yitzchak Bereid Rav Mashashia uschiris mikanya. Again, now we're gonna upschlag. Uschiris mikanya v'tanan Yisrael shesacha para mekayin. Now, guys, an animal is kinyan kaspo of a kayin. We know a kayin is unique. He can eat truma. Not only he can eat truma, his animal can eat truma. You want to hear this crazy thing? If you're a Yisrael and you eat truma, you chayim misibdei shemayim. But the Elsie or whatever, the cow can eat the truma. I find it very kinyan kaspo. It's kinyan kaspo. So now, Yisrael shesacha para mekayin. He rents a par from the kohen. So in other words, the kohen owns it. Yachilenu kashine truma, right? He go ahead and feed it truma. The kohen shesacha par Yisrael, afal pi shem zeha alav. Even though the mezainis is on the kohen, lo yachlenu kashine truma. He can't go ahead and feed him truma. V'sakadaita schiras kanya amai lo yachilenu. Why can't he go ahead and feed him truma parididei, who is considered his para? Elishmam, you know, schiris like kanya, right? Now you say schiris is not kanya. Good, guys. Because we have a proof schiris is not kanya. Good. So, guys, now if schiris is not kanya, let's go back to our original premise. Why can't I sell a behema gasa to a guy? Because you may come to rent it to a guy. You said rental. It's in the guy's rishus. You see from here, it's not in the guy's rishus. So, mamela, we can go back to the first teretz. We came onto the test drive because we did away with the first teretz. Now we can come back to the first teretz. The hashda the amit schiris lekanya. The reason why you can't sell a behema gasa to a guy is gezei mishum schiris ugezei mishum she'ela ugezei mishum nisyaynei. All three. Geshma. Notice we kept the second teretz, but we went back to the first teretz. In other words, she'ela linyan einsin, right? It's in your rishus, but who owns this animal? The mashal. Who owns the animal? The maschir. And Mamela, if that animal is going to work on Shabbos, you're going to be over this as Shvisas Mamtai. Okay, it's just a. Okay, anyway. Rashi deals with a question over here. I think it's fascinating that you would miss it. How could a Jew feed the first case? It's the Kain's para. The Jew rents it. The Jew can feed it truma. Where did you get truma from?
Separated.
He doesn't own it. It's not his money. Good. You separated creates the physical mitzias. Who owns it? Okay, so Rashi deals with it. Let's see Rashi. Guys, you had a question. How could the Jew feed truma? Isn't he stealing? Okay, so let's see Rashi on that. This right before the second line it gets white. Yochilenu kashine truma, afal pi shem mizaynos alav. Even though mizaynos is on the Jew, ain't a goslin. In other words, Rashi is a question. You took the animal, and it's mashma that you have to pay for the animal. Tosfos disagrees with this Rashi. We're going to stay with the Rashi. Guys, you have a chiyuv. You told the kohen, I'm going to feed him. So now, by you feeding truma, you're stealing. You're making money off the kohen. You took his truma and you fed the animal. You know. Afishim I love Einu Gaslin im hechila trumas kohen. If you said truma mamin shein letoivim he. Why? Shahari nice little kohen shiyotza. There's no Mendy the kohen can come to me and say what. Where's my truma? Because I could say I want to give it to Chaim Lax. In other words, it's mom and Shane Latoivim. Like, you don't even have to copy. You know you're not getting it. Like, it's mom and Shane Latoivim. Right? You can't go and make a claim. Right? In other words, he can give it to the kohen that he rented the par from. For Isai kohen mistama nichale. He's probably happy. Umachal im mechila harbe kashini truma. Right. The malay lehikbid. Why should he be makbid? But like ain't yuchedes lay. It's not the makbid. Lefikach mitag sheyoyda shenois lay masay miyasa kashinin hirbe v'ayin yafa. He'll give a lot. Yosim mish ilu hayishalay shalay. He would give more than when it was his own. Nichalei. See, ain't a gasen. So Rashi points out that, or can we speaking that his wife is a bas kohen and got it from the father-in-law. But that would answer the question logistically how he got truma. Bottom line, Yotzim D'Reinu, guys. This you say this Dikadin. Right? Right? This. Why can't you sell an animal to a guy? Behemagasa, work. What about an ego? Can't sell it. What about a sayag? Sayag. What about the Sayachim can't sell it. So look at this Tosfos. You see that when Tosfos gets very wide, guys, second wide line, V'hashta chazinon. You see towards the end of the line, guys, like 5 words from the end of the line on the second Breite Shira, as they say in Yiddish. Kenny, it's a Breite Shura, Kenny. It's a broad line. So now, V'hashta chazinon del kuli alma, bein l'rashbam, bein l'reinu tam, Asa limcha lo'avid kechavim magalim sayachim b'chol behemet tameya. V'alkach yesh l'tmua alkein yesh l'tmua. B'maho yisaimchim limcha agalim sayachim lo'avid kechavim. V'gam misusim nami yesh l'tmua. In other words, these was not uncommon in the Middle Ages to go ahead and sell. I know a mat is it. The bishlema oisan shem yuchadim el rechiva. Bishlema the horses that are miyuchid for rechiva. Nichad the pasuk the pasuk Rabbi Yochanan keben b'seira hamati b'sus lefi she'oisa by malacha she'ain by issa deraisa. There is no issa deraisa, of course it's right. When we tama oikif ein lesser, the oikif bottle gabei adam aroichav alav, and it's not carrying. Aval me'oisei susim she'im miyuchadam limshach b'karoin. Let's say the stagecoach, right? And you have the horses, guys that you don't ride directly on, but they schlep the stagecoach. That is working for you. So how could you go ahead and sell that? Let's say the guy tells you, you know what? I'm buying the animal to work the animal. So l'chayra, why don't you go Zeratu? So no, basically Tosfos is asking in the Middle Ages what happened to Psak Halacha. I love these Tosfos in that bring it contemporary for the 12th century or 13th century. But contemporary nonetheless. V'yesh leimar, the lefi maskonas hatalmid, the shari lemizvan eda de safsira, ayoda de safsira. In other words, you're able to sell through a middleman. you have a broker, a middleman, you're able to sell it. Because it doesn't recognize the voice. Nicha, you're happy because the animal's not going to go ahead. If you test drive, it's not going to listen to you. They don't recognize our voice, just like they don't recognize the voice of the broker, of the middleman. They don't recognize our voice. Therefore, you don't have to worry about about the test drive. Also, that they say this things you don't lend out. You spoon your wife in your car. This I heard that from Joe Katz, by the way. 3 things you don't lend out. You spoon your wife in your car. So I guess they didn't lend out their horses, so therefore you don't have to worry about that. Mule. Those who do go ahead and lend to its shver. Those days, when there are many Jews together. If you had an animal that he didn't need, he would sell it to his friend. And he would take a loss. What are you going to do? Well, in other words, guys, then Jews live together, so you know why you don't have to sell it to a guy? Because you could sell it to a Jew. But now that you're spread out in those times, so if you don't let it send it to a guy, who are you going to sell it to? It's practical. Who are you going to sell it to? Right? Okay, so again, fascinating thesis that gives you an insight that either because we're not nisyone, we're not worried about the test drive because it's not going to come after our voices. We're not worried about borrowing or renting because it wasn't done, and another teretz, and even in a place where it was done, you have that we said don't sell it to a guy is because you could sell it to a Jew because there are many Jews around. But again, in this time where Taisus is saying this, they didn't live together to an extent, and therefore you have trouble finding a buyer, and therefore there was the heter, a waiver to sell it to a guy. I thought Taisus was very interesting. Okay, Rav Ada Sharel Zvune Chamra Ayada Disafsira. He permitted to sell. This is what Taisus just quoted, a chamar through the hand of a middleman, a broker. If you're worried about what nisyane, he doesn't recognize the voice. So you don't have to worry about the test drive. The Oslam Machma said that it's going to go because of him. That maybe the middleman is going to lend it out or rent it out. Since it's not his, he won't lend it and he won't rent it. Guys, this trying to sell a horse, right? But you know what? If you lend it out, what might happen? The guy will find something wrong with it. I said horse. In other words, there's 2 reasons why he won't rent it. One, it's not his, and secondly, why would he want it in the possession of the person? When you rent a car, fellas, you rent a car. You rent a junky car. What do you say? I'm so happy it's not mine. You go away on vacation. You rent a car. You think I still remember I rented a Mustang. I thought it's a cool thing. I was so uncomfortable. I was like sitting low. It was just very uncomfortable. And I wasn't when I was very old. I thought, what a chashuv thing to have. It didn't work. So in other words, you're not going to go ahead and rent out an animal where he could possibly find the problem in the animal. So Mamela says Rav Ada Yisoid, and this is that, and most of it, again, I guess you could through a broker. Once you're going ahead and selling through a broker, then you don't have anything to worry about. The test drive, it's not going to listen to his voice, and he's not going to go ahead and rent it or lend it. Rav Huna Zavin Ahi Para Lo Ovid Kechavim. He sold a para to Ovid Kechavim. Amar Rav Chisda, my time of Ovid Marhaki. Why did you go ahead and do that? Amalei. So Rav Huna said to Rav Chisda, maybe if for the purpose of shchita, Rashi, Vitalin and Likula, and will be makel. In other words, this is, guys, very important for the rest of the sugya. When do we say lifnei iver leisitei michshol? This is all lifnei iver, guys, right? When we say lifnei iver, by Revia, it's lifnei iver. Lifnei iver, you'd say it when you can't be toil in something else. But over here, we can be toila. We could say, I sold him a para as the shchita. So what about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah just said behema gasa. Right? Says Rashi, umasisim behema tameya, spilling about behema tameya, and therefore what? You don't have to worry. You can't be toilet. It's the shchita. And afilu b'stama. Inami b'tahayiru mefarish le'evik chavim d'lekumikoi. In other words, the guy told him he's not going to shecht it, so then you can sell it for various reasons. So says Rav Chis, in other words, if you could be toila, that what is going, then you could sell it. That's a chiddush. Mishnah says you can't. Mishnah speaking about behemoth tameya, so there's no being toila, or the guy told you he wants to keep the animal around, so you can't be toila. Those are the two possibilities. So ema l'shachti zavna. He bought it for the purpose of shchita. Says the Gemara, uminot teimra de amrinon, Rashi, uminot teimra de heicha de ikka limitle belifnei iver talinan lekula, heicha limitle belifnei iver that talinan lekula, and you're able to sell it, did none. Beishami oimim, layimcha adam poira hachereshes. Now this para, guys, is melumid in charisha. It's used to not standing there for milk. This para is used to pulling a plow. This para is used to pulling a plow. Layimcha adam para hachareshes b'shvius in the Shemitah year. Why? You'll be over lifnei iva le'sitei michshol, because the Jew obviously wants to go ahead and buy it and use it. Now, who are we selling to? Rashi. Yisrael achoshin ala shvius layimcha loichaveiroi parim u'lumedes la'achvesh v'shem lifnei iva. So we're speaking about Jew. If you would go ahead and sell, a para that's melumid in mat in charisha, you'll be over lifnei iva le'sitei michshol. And we're not talinin over here. So you see, you are talinin, right? So this is a raya, guys. This is a raya that in the place of, again, Rashi said, in the place of lifnei iver, we have to worry about lifnei iver. Im talinan, you don't have to worry. So are we chayish that this guy is going to go ahead and do work? Yes, he's chayish al shmita. Rashi said he's chayish al shmita. Since he's chayish al shmita, and you're selling an animal for that purpose, since Beis Hillel says talinon that you could check the animal, afapi you have these various factors that l'chayr you should be chayish al lifnei iver. Since talinon, we're not chayish lifnei iver. It's l'chayr a very good raya. Amar Rava, change the gersa. Mi dami. Is this comparable to the case what of selling to a goy and saying l'shchita? Hasam ain't other mitzvah al shvisas behemtoi b'shvias. No person is mitzvah on shvias behemtoi b'shvias. Hacha other mitzvah al shvisas behemtoi b'shabbos. In other words, by directly selling it, right, on shmita, you're not worried about that. You're not worried about it. If he works the animal, guys, if he works the animal, you're not over in Issa. Exactly. No, this guy what? Again, what is this guy doing? This guy is, you can't sell an animal. You can't sell an animal because you're worried that the guy's going to go ahead and do something. Good. Shemitah year. What happens at worst? What happens if we would work the animal? As was. He's being over the issa of what? Of Shemitah. But you didn't do anything wrong. So this is not comparable to the case where you did something wrong. Because by you going ahead and selling it to a guy, you may come to lend it to a guy and you mitzvah on Shabbos. So you can't compare Shabbos where there's an Aveira to Shemitah where there is no Aveira working the animal. So it's not comparable. So no, you don't have a proof that talina in a pace of what? Of lifnei iver. Because there is no lifnei iver over here. There is no lifnei iver over here. That's what we're saying. Rashi. Ein le mitzvah shvisas behemta b'shvias. Hilkach lekal lemigza mishum sheila v'schiris v'nisyoinei. V'imishum lifnei iver leisitei michshol talina b'shchita. It will be toilet that he's going to shecht it. Aval gabi oivit kechavim l'inyan Shabbos adam mitzvah shvisas behemta b'Shabbos v'ikal lemigza mishum kolhani, either because sheila schiris or nisyoinei. Okay, so you don't have a good raya. Amalei Abaya says Abaya. Any place a person is mitzvah, is it asa? Or a person's mitzvah on is it asa? Very sada the other mitzvah shvisa sadeo, b'shvis. Not allowed to work your field in shvias. V'tanan beishami oimim lo yimcha adam sada near b'shvias. A person should not sell a field that is plowed over in Shvius, or Beis Hillel Matiri, and Beis Hillel permits it, because you can go ahead and leave it empty. So what do you see? That even in a place where you're mitzvah, talinan, we do say talinan. We're toilet that what? We're toilet that you could leave it empty. Maskal Ravashi, v'chal heicha de'ein odem mitzvah shari. When a person the ein adam mitzvah, where he's not mitzvah, is permitted. And as you said, what did you say, fellas? You said Beis Hillel said by Shemitah year, since he's not mitzvah on Shvius behemtei on Shemitah, you could sell it. Now I'll show you a case where you're not mitzvah and it's asa. I'll show you a case where you're not mitzvah and it's asa. Bari kalim, they know the mitzvah al Shvius is kalim b'Shvius. You're not mitzvah in Shvius kalim, guys. Just like you're not mitzvah on you resting your animal in Shemitah, you're not mitzvah on your kalim resting in Shemitah. B'tanan, eluhin kalim shein adam mishoyle moichron. These are the kalim that a person does not have a right to sell. B'Shvius. Hamachreisha, the plow, v'chol keleha, ha'oil, the yoke, and all its keleha. V'mizra is the shovel, v'adeker is the hoe. That's Rashi's pshat. And the chayra, you can't sell these. But 1 second, are you mitzvah in Shvius kalim? No. And Shemitah. Yet nonetheless, you'd be over lifnei eva selling this to a guy who is a chashid. You don't have right to sell them. El Amr Ravashi, Kol Heicha de'ikar lemitli, where it could be toila. We'll see Rashi in a second. Talinan. The afagav de mitzvah. Guys, you hear this? Even if you mitzvah, like on Shvisas behemtoi, im talinan l'shchita, you'll be okay. Like Rav Huna. But Kol Heicha de'leka lemitli, but where there's nothing to be toila in, like lei talinan, afagav de'ena mitzvah, like the case of Shemitah with the kalim. Rashi said, the ikalimitli kigoin behema v'sada near the sada adam kaifetz liknaisai mishum de'ena matzulai kol shah liknais mishum shasa the lakamon. We'll see later on. Because he sold it for a reason. But the lekalim kan kalim alalu. Guys, watch. You have a field that goes up for sale. Buy it. It's not coming around. Not coming around again. You don't. In other words, if I don't buy it now, there's no guarantee it's going to be around. So talinon will be toilet to buy it. Masha'en ken kalim. You go to your local Ace Hardware. You go to Home Depot. You can go ahead by the Lowe's. Like I gave you all three. Go ahead and pick it up. So in other words, we can't be toilet that he could have bought it. We can't be toilet that he's not going to work. Because why is he buying it now? He doesn't need it now. He needs it for next year. Why is he buying it now? Because he's going to use it now. And we can't be toilet and say it won't be available a year from now, because it will be. But by a field, it won't be available. And that's the difference. So it has nothing to do with the mitzvah. It has to do with what? Talinon. Are we toilet or not? So by a field that we could be toilet, right? By a field we could be toilet and say that he wants the field because it's available now. Mashen ken kalim not. That's the territory of Rashi. Rabbi Zav and Ahu Chamel Yisrael Achoshed Limcha Lo V'Kechavim. Rabbi sold a chamor to Yisrael that's choshed to sell to a guy. So in other words, he sold it to Yisrael who's choshed to sell it to a guy. It's the Oivan lift the evil site mechshel.
Yeah. Not like his job.
Actually, it's not. My time of in Marhachi. Why'd you do that? So Amalei Anoli Yisrael Zvini. I sold it to a Jew. Amalei v'Ozl Mazman leVikechavim. Buyer said he's going to sell it to a guy. It says the Gemara leVikechavim Kamazman Yisrael like Kamazman. What's the guarantee he's going to sell it to what? A guy. Maybe he'll sell it to a Jew. So guys, let's just the case, guys. Outside, Rabba went ahead. He sold a chamar to a Jew who was choshed that this Jew would sell to a guy. No, not it's second step. Second step. That's what you mean. You mean it's a double lifnei eva. It's a double lifnei eva. So says, what is Rabbi Taina? There's no guarantee that this Jew is going to sell it to that this Jew is going to sell it to a guy. maybe you sell it to a Jew. So in other words, if he would sell it to a guy, I would be over lifnei iver. I would be over lifnei iver if I sell it to what a Jew who could sell it to a guy. It's not lifnei. A guy is lifnei, right? But a Jew, if you sell it to a Jew, and you know that Jew could sell it to a guy, you'll be over lifnei iver, even though you're not the one doing it. Right? But in other words, if I sell it to you and you sell it to a guy, I'm over lifnei iver. But again,
you're over because of me.
correct.
Right.
But it's interesting. But in second, you don't have to sell it to a guy. There's no guarantee you're selling something to a guy. Okay, so that's what Rabbi's time is. But you can far from Rabbi, if you would sell it to a guy, I would be over lifnei iver, which is it's like Eshi says, it's one step removed. Okay, so now, so that's what Rabbi said. He says there's no guarantee. Esivei, I'll show you that Rabbi, you're incorrect. Malkum shenogo limcha behema daka lekutim, in a place where the minig is to sell a behema daka lekutim moichrin. Why? Because right, shaloi limcha ein moichrin. My time. Now they're not chashir. They're not. We said in the Mishnah the reason you don't sell a behema daka, small behema, is because of what? Of znus. But the kutim, it doesn't see yechayish for znus. My timer. Ilaim mishum de chashidei aravia umichash. Again, we're gonna have a long brisa, guys. Are we choshid the kutim on revia? Batanya. Eim amidim behema pun the koyshel lev dekachavim. Secharim etzel secharim. The male animals etzel males, and the kavos etzel the kavos. In the kavos, you worry that the husbands are going to come around and be with the animal. Vein sarach leim in the kavos etzel secharim. With secharim etzel the kavos. Vein moisim behema leroya shalahem. Vein miyachdim imahem as murder. You should be miyachid with a goy as murder. They moisim them tinaik l'lamdei sefer, right? You don't want them teaching them bad things, secular subjects, l'lamdei umnis, or even to teach them a trade. Avam amidim behem b'chunish al kutim. In other words, we're going to say the same brisa over, but the first brisa was speaking about goyim, the second one speaking about kutim. Avam amidim behem b'pun the koish al kutim. Secharim etzon lekevos. When the kevos is secharim, vein sarach leim is secharim etzon secharim, and the kevos etzon lekevos. You're not worried about murder. Safer that they're going to teach him bad things you're not worried about. You're not worried about teaching him a trade. Alma leichashidi. You see, they're not chayeshwat on revia. So why can't you go ahead and sell the makam? Why can't you sell to a kuti a gedaka? V'oy tanya ein marchim lehem leizayin. You can't sell weapons, like he's klizayin, nor the handle for the weapon. They mashchizin lehem, you don't sharpen the weapon. As a zayin, this is for the goyim. They merchim lehem like sadin, like kolin, like kabolin. These are different. These are different. Sadin is something to protect your legs. And kolin, clubs. I don't know. Chains. No, shalshel is a chain. Shalbazel. Echad a club. Echad avi kachav meechad kuti. No difference. My timer. Now, why can't you sell to the kuti? He named the chashidi ashvichas damim umi chashidi. That's amid umiyachdim imayim. You said you could be miyachi with a kuti. So obviously you can't sell them this stuff. There's nothing to do with that. El mishum the asil is when they loy v'kechavim. You can't sell to the kut because he may come sell to a guy. Guys, so let's consider for all intents and purposes we have machlokes whether kutim are geri eres, geri emes, or geri arayos. So let's for all intents and purposes let's say the geri emes. So therefore, it would be the exact same parallel, correct? You go ahead, you sell to says Rava, I can sell to I sold Rabba, says Rabba, I sold my animal to a Jew that's chayshid, and I'm not worried that he's going to sell it to another, because a guy, because Talin, and he could sell it to a Jew. We see over here the same case. A kuti is the same thing as a Jew that's chashid. You can't sell them weapons. Why? Because they may come to go ahead and sell the weapons to a guy. So you see, you are worried about the second step. And therefore, for sure, you can't. He's gonna do it. And Yisrael of it tshuva, and even though he could do tshuva, right? And therefore, that's the difference between the kuti and the Jew. And therefore, Rabbi sold it to the Jew that's chashid. Ivam Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Avua. Kiderach Shalom Asal Limchalevi Kechavim. Kach Asal Limchal Yisrael. Achad Shal Limchalevi Kechavim. Okay, so Rabbi heard this. What did he do? Rod Basrei, Tilsa Parsa. He ran after him 3 Parsa. Because the army Parsa, the Chola, he ran after him at a half a Parsa Bliatkwe, and nonetheless he was not able to go ahead and catch up to him. Okay, look at the Taisvos. Levi Kachavim Masvin Levi Sole Masvin. That's what Rabbi said. Good, and Maskon it's not going to be good. Umaskon Maskin and the Asa Lemizvin Yisrael Chashid. It's Asa. Do you have the Taisus? Everyone have the Taisus, guys? The second to last Taisus. Everyone, second to last Taisus. So now, Limaskana, fellas, Rabbi said he was wrong. Meaning, you can't sell it to a Jew that's Chashid, because he may come to sell it to a guy. Then time after Taisus, guys, we had before. Could you sell Levina? Could you sell Levina to a guy? Guys, eye contact. Could you sell Levina to a guy? No. Why? Could you sell in large volume? Chavila. Yes, you could. What was the difference? Right? Aren't you worried that you're going to sell it in wholesale? He's going to sell in retail, and they're going to use it for Avodah Zorah. So you mitzvah only on the first step, not the second step. So we're asking, guys, a very basic question. Why, in that case, are we not worried? In this case, we are worried. You know what the answer is? You sold it there to a guy. A guy is not mitzvah unless they nichshel. So even if he sells to another guy, you didn't do anything wrong. But over here, you sold it to a Jew, and you're setting that Jew up for lifnei iva. It's geschmack, guys. The Hasam Mari Boibe Kechavim, Sheina Musar al Lifnei Iva, it's not one of these. A guy, it says Tais, this is not Musar on Lifnei Iva. The Fikach ain't on Choshishim in Oibe Kechavim Yimchal Chabeirei. So therefore, even though he sold in volume, we're not Choshid. If he sells it to somebody else, he sells it to somebody else. Aval Hacha de Mari Yisrael Choshid. Here we're speaking about Yisrael that we're suspicious that he will go ahead and sell to a guy. Anu Misharim, we are warned. Shal Shum Yisrael de Kol Al Yadenu. Very, very important words. Anu Mizharim, we are warned. Shelo Yavei Shum Yisrael, no Jew should come. Lidei Takala Al Yadenu Harav Rebbe Chanan. That's Rebbe Chanan Bali Taisvis, right? Void Dechad Lifnei Hu Shelo Yachta Yisrael B'Shelu Schiris Nishani. Void Dechad Lifnei Hu. It's only one. Shelo Yachta Yisrael B'Shelu Schiris Nishani. In other words, it's only this person that you're selling to. Forget about the second step. How can you sell it to what? That this person should come to go ahead and rent it or sell it to somebody else or do a test drive.